My name is Debbie Davidson, and I work for an organization called CORD. I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting me to come here and talk with you today. I'll tell you a little bit about the organization, a little bit about myself before we kick this off. But the one thing I mentioned to Jamie, because I sat through a session, is certainly Georgia is in good hands, because a lot of the same sources that he cited, you're going to hear about again. You're going to hear it punctuated. So a lot of the things that you're doing, you're on the right path, no pun intended. But you've got good people that are working on things that have national best practices around them as well. So first of all, CORD is the Center for Occupational Research and Development. We were founded in 1979, located in Waco, Texas. I am not from Waco, Texas, as you can tell from my accent. I'm from the north. And CORD prepares individuals for success in careers in higher education. We serve all different types of entities, from school districts to community and technical colleges, all 50 state departments of education, and 20 different nations. And our initiatives include things like career pathways, workforce analysis, curriculum development work, practitioner training, program delivery, technical assistance, and so on. We work with a number of different funding agencies using grants to work with colleges and K-12 systems across the country to develop career and technical education and contextualized instruction. A little bit about myself. I have 30 years in higher education. I started out working for a 4-year liberal arts private university. I moved to the University of Wisconsin for a number of years in continuing education, and then finally landed the dream job of working at a technical college, which is where I believe all the magic comes together. Education and the business world, and it is a unique position to be in to help speak the languages of both of those industries. While I was at Gateway, I served as the Vice President for Business and Workforce Solutions, and I oversaw 5 advanced technology centers. Those advanced technology centers focused on curricular areas like manufacturing, engineering, IT, bioscience, transportation, and then we had a dual enrollment grade 9 through 12 academy as well. I also worked on partnerships and did contract training, working with large companies like SC Johnson and Snap-on Tools, and many, many small and mid-sized companies as well. A variety of employment engagement opportunities, including things from naming rights on buildings, to scholarships, to facilities and equipment, oversaw apprenticeship, and then those partnerships. So our plan for this session is to kind of do a Career Pathways 101. And I realize Jamie touched on many of these things, but we're going to talk about connecting education and economic development. Partnerships as the basis for that transformation. Where's the easy button? How do you engage employers? And we will spend quite a bit of time on that aspect. Building bridges instead of walls. How do you design those programs and then do the implementation? And then once you have it all put together, how do you manage all those moving parts and do it well? So why career pathways? Why are they important? And who do they serve and who do they benefit? And we'll be answering those questions as we go through this presentation. So today's headlines, you know, the existing mismatch between employer skill needs and the available workforce, something that we are all very, very familiar with. We see these headlines every day. Credential and degree attainment is critical to our US economic growth. And then career pathways, I believe, represent that intersection between workforce development and economic development. So it's where you bring the jobs and the individuals together as far as their skill sets. So as we look at where are the jobs, 65% of those jobs today will require some college or better. Keep in mind that this comes from a report that was done in June of 2013. It's called Recovery 2020, and we thought, man, that is so far away. Now we are a few months away from 2020. And we look at this, and these numbers are pretty close to what the projections were back in 2013. So they take a look at where the graduates. It took 100 students that were in 9th grade. 69 will graduate high school. 42 will go into college. 28 will come back that next year. 13 will graduate, 4 with an associate's degree and 9 with a bachelor's degree. Now, Georgia's numbers are higher than that based on what Jamie shared in his presentation a little bit earlier. So congratulations on that. You're doing a good job. You're doing better than what this projection stated. But there is a contrast there. And we know that those jobs are going to require something beyond high school. And it might only be a short-term certificate, but it might be a bachelor's degree, and it might be an associate's degree. There's a skills report out called A Call to Action. And this is from OECD. OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And they did a study on a survey of adult skills. And it tested adult skills in literacy, numeracy, and problem solving. And they found that 36 million Americans have low literacy skills. Nearly 24 million of them are in the workforce. Additionally, 46 million Americans struggle with numeracy. And we know that the higher skills are all about literacy and numeracy and lead to improved economic and social outcomes, higher employment earnings, and better health care. So career pathways really provides a vehicle for helping those low-skilled Americans get into those jobs and reach that ladder of opportunity. As a note, you will have access with resource links to everything that I'm referencing. So there will be a separate PDF with links to every one of these reports, if you will. So what can be done to address these skill gaps? What's a career pathway and what are the steps to take? So let's start with what are career pathways. A lot of people define that differently. And what we heard earlier, some start with the cradle to career. Others talk about that pathway really from maybe a middle school or even a high school level into the job market. So the career pathway landscape was once considered the domain of the workforce professionals. It was the career and tech ed people that talked about career pathways, not the academics, not a university, not really much even within the K-12 system. But the approach is now being successfully implemented across education, workforce, and human services as well, benefiting a broader group of learners. But what does it mean for you as the adult education programs in your state or your local area? With all the terminology that's swirling around, how do you sift and sort through that information and find out what's applicable to you? Well, broad federal support. So talk about Department of Labor came out with career pathways, their TACT grants, their workforce innovation grants. Department of Education came out with career connections, policy to performance. And the Department of Health and Human Services had the Health Professions Opportunity Grants. All of those had a focus on creating partnerships and pathways within their funding requirements. So even aside from WIOA, there are different organizations, federal organizations, that are forcing the conversation about pathways. WIOA added to that piece as well. So career pathways within WIOA is really about aligning those skills, preparing the individuals to succeed in a range of different occupations, including apprenticeships. Included counseling to support the individual, and concurrent education and training for a specific occupation or occupational cluster. That concurrent education and training we're going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation about contextual education, making people understand, why do I have to learn this? Why am I taking this? How does this connect to what I want to do with my life? Organizing education, training, and support services to meet those needs, to accelerate. If you have individuals who come in from a bridge program and they have to take a year's worth of remediation before they get to the meat of the program, they'll never stay with you to get to the meat of the program. So meeting them where they are. And enabling individuals to get the high school diploma and at least one recognized post-secondary credential as well. And helping individuals enter or advance with an occupation. WIOA is designed to help job seekers access employment, education, training, and support services to succeed in the labor market and to match those employers with the skilled workforce. So in other words, if we take WIOA and we boil it down to the simplest terms, labor market demand is at the core of this. K-12 and post-secondary education partners all working together, having wraparound services for those learners because we're meeting them where they are, and those services can be varied. Earn and learn options and employer consortia at the table. Collaboration is key. Validation of skills. Skill sets from different educational institutions can be very broad and varied. How do we take a look at how do we validate those skills? How do we look at the skill outcomes and measure them and know that they are validated by industry saying those are important skills to have? And then lifelong learning. We all know that everybody will have a number of jobs and perhaps a number of careers throughout their working lifetime. So regardless of the terminology that we use or the model that we implement, Career Pathways is about making it easier for adult learners to succeed in education and careers. Ultimately strengthening the workforce and the economy, making it a seamless process for them, eliminating the roadblocks, accelerating the instruction, and then providing the support needed by those adult learners to stay the course. So here's a snapshot of the progression of opportunities available. As we take a look at, it supports student transitions, eliminates the barriers, and offers those multiple entry and exit points. So if we look at the very first box that says secondary education, we call that the traditional pipeline, right? So that's where individuals are coming in right out of high school. But then in adult education, we have those returning students. Maybe they never completed high school. Maybe they did complete high school, but it's been 20 years for them. How do we get them into post-secondary education? There are going to be barriers that each one of them have, whether they're high school, traditional, or they're a non-traditional student that are coming back. And how do we offer those multiple entry and exits so they can flow in and out of the system easily so they can move on to either a certificate or a degree program at the end of it? So these connected sequential steps on the pathway include support for those seamless transitions, multiple entry and exit points, as I stated, help eliminate those barriers, and it communicates to our communities that it's a systemic change that we're looking at. We're not doing business as always. We're working together in a partnership and collaboration. So connecting the traditional silos of education, labor, and human services to form a coherent system facilitates the development of those programs that provide a holistic, comprehensive, and coordinated set of education and employment services for the individuals. The Career Pathway Program blends elements from different parts of the workforce, education, and human services systems, enabling individuals to move seamlessly. So as we look at this approach, this illustration, which is from an organization called CLASP, you can see that there are multiple entry points. If you can see the red arrows that are on there, we have everything from adult basic ed to high school or CTE, military, post-secondary system, or apprenticeship. Those are the endpoints. Those are the on-ramps for individuals. The arrows at the bottom are those that are coming out. The first step might be they get a license or an industry credential. They get a certificate or a diploma, a 2-year degree or 4-year degree, and it moves them along that job trajectory as well. What you'll see in the middle is the well-connected and transparent process, what we put together for them. So we have the individuals coming in and individuals exiting to the jobs, but that arrow is a progression of what we as a system put together for them to help move them along that pathway. Here's an example of a career ladder. Some places call them career pathways, some call them career ladders. This is for a CNC operator, just as an example. So the lowest level of the rung is an assembly technician. And then next up is the entry-level machinist, an operator, a programmer, and then a production supervisor at the top rung of that ladder. So for this particular page, we've pulled out the second level on that ladder, which is the entry-level machinist. And it says what they'll earn, what the credential is. In this place, it's a machinist certificate. How long will it take? It will take them a year. Where they will go to access this training, and then what are the skills that they will know at the end of it. The one thing that we need to stress very strongly is that those skills at the end of it and these different rungs on the ladder only exist if the employers say we will hire somebody with that skill set. So educators do not put together an entry-level machinist and package some courses and say, here's a great certificate, you should take this. If the employer isn't at the table saying, I would hire somebody with those skills, then that credential is meaningless. For many, many years, and like I said, I've worked in education 30 years, we had faculty that were saying, well, let's package these together because this seems like a marketable certificate that people might want to take and they might be drawn to, and perhaps they can get a job with it. Those days are gone. We now need to have employers at the table saying, there is a job that exists that correlates specifically with the skill set of this certificate or this chunk of curriculum, if you're calling it a credential or certificate. So the ladder and the pathway, as I said before, are used interchangeably, but this is one visual. So within career pathway systems at the state and local levels, it really is about connecting together the state system, your local and regional system, which from what I have read and heard and learned about today, is pretty well connected system, as you are all working together with the same terminology and the same mission in mind, and how you pull those programs together. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this graphic. This is out of the Department of Labor, Education, and Training Administration, and this is the 6 key elements of career pathways. And I realize it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to start with that red box, which says number 1, which is building cross-agency partnerships and clarifying the roles. I would recommend to you, this is something that you do before you even bring an employer to the table, because you want to get your ducks in a row. You want to make sure that the partners are working together, and that's the united front that you want to present to your employers as well. So getting faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, workforce development, economic development, all those support services together is your very first step. The second step is identifying the sector or industry and engaging the employers. Employers don't have a lot of time. It's delightful to see employers that are here today. So when you do bring them to the table, you don't want to have these conversations with your other partners about, well, I thought you were going to do that. No, that's something that we can do, and have that type of dialogue while you have employers in the room. Employers are there to give you intel and job skill validation and some hiring trends, hopefully for the next 3 to 5 years, because that's what you're building your programs on. The third step is designing the programs. So inventory, what do you already have? What is the curriculum? What are the programs? What are the certificates and credentials that already exist? And then once employers tell you, well, we need B, and you're like, well, we only have A and C, you're going to create B in order to meet that demand of that employer. Number 4 is identifying the funding needs and the sources, pretty self-explanatory. Number 5 is key, aligning policies and programs. In education, and I think this is true for workforce and economic development as well, sometimes we need to get out of our own way. So we have policies and procedures in place for certain ways that we've always done things. And then we come up with an employer who says, well, I need them to be ready in an 8-week period of time. And you're like, well, people are working, so they're going to be retraining for this, and our classes are only available Tuesdays and Thursdays between 8 and 10 a.m. So your policies and procedures might be, we're going to run second shift classes, we're going to run classes on a weekend, we did welding classes on a Saturday and Sunday, whatever it's going to take. And that's a mind shift, because it also means within your organization, you, who are the one at the table, has to sell the rest of your organization on the fact that this is the right thing to do, and that this is what's necessary. And then lastly, measure the system change and the performance. So this is a valuable model for system building, and there's a toolkit that goes along with this that asks questions along the way. Are we in compliance with this? Where do we rate ourselves on the continuum? So as you sit here today and you look at these 6 different components, think about locally, because I understand you're from all over the state. So locally, how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these 6 areas? And it's a constant reiteration, so you're constantly growing, you're constantly building more partnerships. We found that the more that we engaged different partners and employers, and we noticed where there were gaps, we found other partners that we could bring in to fill those gaps. And as you bring more partners to the table with more wraparound services for your students, you're going to build the most exemplary program that you can. So as you look at system building, there's 2 different levels, obviously. The state level, state leaders want to ensure that efforts are coordinated across agencies and funding streams. They want to make sure that they establish and promote a statewide vision for career pathways, that they monitor performance, and they provide professional development for practitioners. At the local level, you're really down in the weeds, right? So the partnership development, who's going to sit across the table from me when I'm working on these projects? And then what employers am I going to bring in? Who am I going to bring in from that employer? You have an employer as big as Caterpillar sitting in the room. Who's the right person to be engaged locally, right? Is it going to be a CEO? Is it going to be a mid-level manager? There are going to be different times to engage different people from the company. Sometimes you want a manager or supervisor that can talk specifically to the skills, but they might not know the hiring trends for the next 3 to 5 years. So having the right people at the table. And no matter what the tagline or the model or whatever you choose to call it, across the state, your pathway should be called the same thing. And I think you're already there with that. Seamless, supportive, and the same message. So as I said before, local program engagement. Educators do not plan these programs in isolation. The partners communicate frequently over time. The once a year come in and have pizza and we'll tell you what we've been doing, and then you can do a stamp of approval and we'll see you next September. When we bring you back, those days are over. And it is an interesting dynamic when you first start bringing employers to the table, because you find that there's some language that they're using that you're not used to, and there's some language, I should say terminology, not language, but terminology that you're using that they're not used to. And so developing a common vocabulary, and we know in education and workforce we use an awful lot of acronyms, and sometimes it's difficult for us to explain what that acronym means so that an employer understands what we're talking about. So roles and responsibilities, once we bring everybody together, defining those roles and responsibilities can be difficult. And figuring out who does what and when they do it, and have they done it in the past, and are they the best one to do it is key. So it's no surprise everybody needs to be at the table, the educators, the employers, the community leaders. And if you aren't already working with them, this is the critical first step for you. So how many of you, by a show of hands, are working in this type of a partnership within your local area? Good, good. But I would say that's a majority of you. If you aren't already working on this and you say, well, you know, we approach people, but they're like, we don't have time for this. We're down to the business of business. Economic development people will say, we're busy recruiting new companies, retaining the companies that we have, helping them grow. Employers will say, we're running a business, we don't have time for this. So if you can talk to them about the return on investment, here's what you tell employers. So everybody's looking for their ROI or their WIFM, what's in it for me, right? But what's in it for employers? We know they want access to those workers to increase productivity, reduce their recruitment, shorten how we get new employees onboarded. They want to promote from their local employees that are loyal to them, that they already know. And they want access to skill upgrading for their incumbent workers. Doesn't seem unreasonable, does it? Here's what the community wants. They want all of those dollars to be aligned. They want the vision to be aligned. They want to enhance the labor pool. They want to keep those employers there and get more employers to come. But if the workforce isn't there, they have a pretty difficult job bringing new employers into town. They also want to increase income levels in the community and reduce poverty, crime, and the support costs. What do educators want? Well, we want to reduce dropouts. It's no fun when we have a full class and then all of a sudden we have 3 students, right? Remedial course enrollment. It is difficult for instructors and for students when they come in and they're not prepared for the first course that they're taking. Or they're not adequately prepared, I should say. They want to enhance the student engagement and increase the number of students going on to college. And by college, I mean some sort of credential, something beyond. And increase the number of students that are earning those credentials and degrees. Both K-12 and post-secondary are being measured by that attainment. How many credentials? How many degrees? Are you issuing certifications? In the state of Wisconsin, if a student earns a certification in high school, that school gets a bonus for every one of the certifications that are earned. So we have funding that is tied to that, outcome-based funding. So you better believe that the K-12s are all on board with this. The policymakers want to increase the impact of those programs. We're spending money on programs. Let's spend them on the right programs, and let's drive that quality of life success. So underlying all of this ROI, so one thing that we don't have on here is what do students want? And what students want is a seamless way to navigate this. They want an easy way to come in, figure out what it is I need to do, what are the jobs that are out there, and how do I get from point A to point B? And how do I do this in a timely manner? So here's some potential partners, and I think from what I'm hearing from all of you, most of you are working with all of these, or a majority of them. At Gateway, we included United Way, we included Department of Corrections, we included the YWCA, and many others. And as I said before, when we started working on a program and we saw that there was a gap, we're like, who in our community offers that? Who can help us with that? And they are more than happy to come to the table because that's part of their mission. Here's some potential roles and responsibilities, and this is pretty broad strokes here, and it may be different in your community, but here's my mantra: stay in your lane. I can't tell you how many times we had to tell that to our partners and ourselves. Stay in your lane. If we, in the past, Gateway, the college I was at, is 110 years old. So we've done a lot of things over the years, right? They weren't all aligned with our mission, but they were things, well, nobody else is doing this, so we're going to do this. Well, guess what? Now there's other organizations that fill that need and that do those types of services, so we don't need to do it all, and we weren't always the best one to do it. So when we sit down with partners, we look at our core mission for each of those organizations and say, yeah, you probably could offer resume writing and some mock interview training and things like that, interviewing skills, but are you the best one positioned, or should that be this organization over here? Keeping people true to their mission and making sure that they are doing the best job that they can that aligns with their goal and what they're there to do. So using the mission and the strengths of each of these organizations is what's key to really developing and implementing a really robust program. So I'm going to give you a spotlight on a couple different places. So Massachusetts, first of all, they have a statewide adult career pathways network. And as you can see, they have 16 WIBs and 29 one-stops, and they had 40 adult career pathway pilot sites at their adult learning centers. Their state's priority was to strengthen those connections and collaborations among adult basic ed, higher ed, and the workforce system. And they were including integrated education and training, workforce prep, and they integrated English literacy and civics within their programs. So they are a group that started with a bridge program. How do we take people from ABE, get them ready to get into this adult career pathway? They had a working group in each of the 16 WIBs with shared responsibility, and a state task force comprised of the directors that met bi-monthly and designed the state guidelines. But there is no easy button, right? So how do we do the engagement with the employers? As I said before, career pathways is at that nexus of workforce development and economic development. Economic developers want to recruit, retain, and strengthen their local employer base. Workforce development wants to say, here's our pool of human resources. How do we take the people that we have? And some of them are formerly incarcerated. Some of them have no high school diploma. Some of them are homeless. Some of them have no transportation. But the people we have are the people we have. So how do we work with all of them instead of taking a choice few that decide to go on to a university and can afford it and are academically prepared for it? And how do we make sure that we are using all of our human resources in the area in order to better our local economy? So somebody told me, and I thought this was kind of a funny way to say this, but nobody lives in the United States. We all live in one state, right? And within our state, we live in a region. And within our region, we live in a county. And so when we look at labor market data, that is United States, Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're looking at something really, really large. And we need to boil that down to what's going on in our county and our neighboring counties so that we can look at where is the growth. Is it healthcare? Is it technology? Finding IT careers is probably one of the most exhaustive things to do because they support every other industry that's out there. So a lot of people who are looking at IT as a career don't think of IT in manufacturing, IT in healthcare. They think of software development. And they think of working for an IT type organization or industry, when really it is so much broader than that. We also look at, the city, baby boomers, obviously, finally leaving, right? And we have millennials coming in. They have different expectations. Expectations of how long it takes to acquire the skills and abilities to do the job, and then what their worth is the minute they acquire those skills and abilities. So we need to work with that. Many of them are focused on the wrong majors, just because either they have not been guided correctly, or as Jamie mentioned, they've only been exposed to a few things, and they're looking for where can I make the most money, whether that's a good fit for them or not, whether they'll be successful or not. So as Jamie said before, we look at, by 2020, 55 million job openings. 43% of them will be new positions, and 56% will be due to retirement. And with only a few months left in 2019 until this becomes true, it will be interesting for us to look back at this projection and see how on the mark it was. Most of those jobs will require post-secondary. They'll be available as boomers retire. STEM professions. Though we say STEM and we say healthcare, healthcare support, and community services, I think in my part of the world, and from what I'm hearing here, manufacturing is alive and well and growing rapidly in our area. It's just those positions don't look anything like they used to. And people who were trained 10 years ago have to continually come back and be retrained because the technology is changing that quickly. But employers are also looking for those cognitive skills: active listening, can you communicate, critical thinking, and nearly all states will need to boost their rates of post-secondary education. That's difficult to do when our graduation rates are so low. So that remediation, that bridge program, and a lot of times what happens is people drop out of high school and they go find some sort of work, and 5 years later, they start thinking, is this all there is? Is this as far as I'm gonna get? And then they come back. So then whatever high school education they had is now 5 years removed from that. They probably weren't good at studying when they were in high school, and now they have to learn how to study all over again, and now they're studying more difficult concepts. And the worst thing to have to tell somebody is you have to start with math, or you have to start with English composition. And if it is something that is just, you have to do math and English comp before you can take any type of CTE course, they're probably not going to stick with it, and they'll stay in a dead-end job. So how do we engage? Let's look at some models of employer engagement. In Southwest Oklahoma, they brought employers together. They had 4 industry needs: manufacturing, healthcare, energy distribution, and simulations. So they did some visioning and stakeholder engagement with some different sessions. You can see who was included in those. And they identified the workforce needs for the next 3 to 5 years. They explored and advocated that career pathways approach, so they had this conversation with everybody. This is the approach that we're taking, and this is what it means. And then they built consensus around an implementation plan. So they brought employers together and educators together, and they did 2 separate tracks. And for the business and professional track, they started with a call to action and a panel discussion that talked about, and it was moderated by their economic development people, that talked about STEM education, how to use internships in the workplace, the college's role in educating workers, and the legislation around internships and apprenticeships, so that employers would understand this is what the landscape looks like from our side of the table. At the same time, all of the educators were taken to visit 3 different companies, take a tour, and see what are the math skills needed here? What are the reading skills needed here? What does a workplace look like today? So if you're not already doing that exchange where you have people going into companies to see firsthand what that looks like, the time is now for that, because it really made a huge difference. And I know we had, Jamie mentioned externships before. We had a lot of faculty members that did even a 1 or 2 week externship at a company so that they could see what is needed in the workplace. And it's very different than hearing from an employer. If you can go in and see, and if you can go in and see some of your former students working in that workplace and the skill set and how they have grown since they've been working there, it's very beneficial. So the industry engagement process looks just so nice and neat when you put it on a slide like this, you know? It's just like, oh, check, 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 inventory people, determine those sectors with the needs, who are the key stakeholders, bring the CEOs together. It's easy. We'll just, a Thursday afternoon, we'll just make that happen. The in-person dialogue sessions and a plan of action. So in a perfect world, this is what it would look like. But we don't live in a perfect world, and it's not always easy to gather people together. And if you're in a more rural area, your challenges are going to be different than what they are if you're going to be in a metropolitan area. So you want to at minimum, meet with employers. You might not be able to hold a forum where you bring everybody together, but you certainly can talk with employers one-on-one and find out what their needs are. And most employers, I hope, are thinking about what do the next 3 to 5 years look like for us? Who's going to be retiring? That's not an unknown to them. What might be unknown is what's the new equipment we're getting, and what are the skills that are going to be needed to operate that equipment, and how different is a plant floor or a hospital going to look in the next 3 to 5 years? Because if they look in the rearview mirror 5 years ago, it would be interesting to have them say, yeah, this is what we expected. We knew we were going to be here. 5 years ago, we knew we were going to be here. Or did we have an inkling that we will be this close to it? So as we engage industry, for example, healthcare, we asked them, what are the top 3 challenges facing the industry over the next 5 years? The industry as a whole, not just a single employer. What are the top 5 areas in which the industry is facing the most severe shortage? And at entry level, what are the skill or employability weaknesses you see in the workforce? This is a great conversation starter, whether you have a forum or you're meeting with one employer and you're kind of just doing a gut check with them. And then, do you anticipate the region having a large enough pool of skilled or certified employees to meet your needs? With these questions, we're trying to determine what are those commonalities among industry, right? So many times we don't want to bring all of the employers together in one room because what Caterpillar is doing is going to be different than what Case or somebody else is doing, right? And you might not all want to sit at the table and share all of that intel, but we're looking for those basic commonalities. So the commonalities we usually hear, lack of a skilled workforce. They don't show up every day. They don't show up on time. Poor work ethic. We got a lot of turnover going on. The pre-employment assessment. You know, we got people coming in here and we thought they'd be good and we find out they don't have the skills that they said they did or that we were promised they did if they were assessed in some way. And then training and retention of supervisors. So we talk a lot about the entry-level worker, but what happens is we take the entry-level worker and eventually after they've been there for a while and they're a good employee, we make them a supervisor. But we don't necessarily help them be a supervisor, right? So just because you're good at doing your job doesn't mean you're going to be good at managing other people that are doing that job. So what are the ways in which we can help employers with that pathway as well? So in Marble Falls, Texas, there was a College to Careers initiative with an adult career pathway forum on healthcare. And they collaborated with higher ed, private industry, and government. They had a new hospital coming into town, 500 new jobs. And Marble Falls, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Anybody here ever heard of Marble Falls? Okay, not a big town. 500 jobs just at the hospital, right? So that's a pretty big impact. So what they did is they looked at this filling the gap with case management for individuals. They were taking people with ABE and ELL, transitioning them into any position possible at the hospital, whether it was housekeeping, whether it was food service, whether it was CNA. They weren't all patient care. And so they're looking, how do we get them in the door and into the culture of this hospital? Once they are in those roles, they may have a pathway out of housekeeping, out of food service, into CNA, and then up the ladder that way. So the local economic development person said, we have the raw ingredients, right? We have the educational institutions that can do the training, and we have the large employer. The gap that is there is an inadequate supply of credentialed individuals. So this is something you hear in your community every single day, right? Why aren't we able to solve this? We have the training. You have the dollars to help with the training, right? And I think part of it is looking at a broader look at the populations. And sometimes we need to help employers see. We did a lot with reentry, with second chance individuals within our community, bringing them in. And at first, employers said we will not take anybody that had any type of background, you know, any type of criminal background, we don't care what it is. 3 years later, we proved to them through pilot programs, some of these people are really good workers. So you can't take an entire population and exclude them from your workforce. We don't have the luxury of doing that. We need everybody on board that we possibly can get. So we talked a little bit before about terminology. So here's some business terms. right? So how many educators in the room would want to take a stab at explaining production yield to me? Or cycle time? All right. Okay, educators in the room, what are some of the words we use that we think employers might be confused by? How about credit for prior learning? PLA, prior learning assessment. How about articulation? How about the difference between a certificate and a certification? We use different terminology, and unless we take the time to explain it, it makes it very difficult for us to move forward in any sort of collaborative partnership. So before you get down to business, you have to talk about a common language. And sometimes that means you're gonna water it down, you're gonna boil it down to its simplest term so that you both have an understanding. Also the motivation of each partner, why are they there? Remember the return on investment before? If you look back at that slide, you'll know why they're there. Everybody's there to get something out of it for themselves, and that's okay because in the end, the individual wins. They get a job, the economy gets stronger, more companies come to town, it's a more vibrant area. Educators don't have students dropping out, their classes are full, enrollment is good, all is right with the world. You also need an agreement on those outcomes. Our outcome measures vary, right? Education has different outcome measures than what business has. And that's okay that they're different, but you have to agree this is what education is measured by, and this is what business is going to measure by. And then evidence that that program will increase worker productivity, because that's the whole reason that you're putting this together. So the power of employer partnerships is not a rubber stamp of approval. It is not a matter of come in, we'll tell you what we're working on, and you can nod your head yes or no. We like this, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up, not really sure, we like this, we're not sure. It's not that. It is about creating a culture of employer leadership. And at best, co-leadership. We work a lot with organizations that have adopted a model called a BILT, a Business and Industry Leadership Team. A lot of colleges still use advisory committee structures where they do have employers come together, sometimes once in the fall, once in the spring. They do review curriculum. Some are really good, some are not so good. The Business and Industry Leadership Team process brings employers together for, get ready for this, a 5-hour session, 5 hours. And ask employers to, we start by doing an inventory of knowledge, skills, and abilities for a particular sector. So if it's in manufacturing, for example, we might say, okay, we have a lot of manufacturers in the area, and they're all looking for mechatronics people, right? So we go to the ONET, you're all familiar with ONET. We pull down what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are expected for somebody in a mechatronics field nationally. And then we bring the employers together, and this is all in a spreadsheet, and you might have 15 to 20 employers there. Some of them are competitors, but it's okay, they're all gonna hire mechatronics people. And you ask them to vote on every one of those knowledge, skills, and abilities. 4, 3, 2, 1, not at all, not applicable. 4 is extremely important. 1 is, it'd be nice for them to have, and 0, it's not applicable to us. In 5 hours, you can have a group of employers go through about 150 knowledge, skills, and abilities. It's quick. Somebody keeps track of this on a spreadsheet, and at the end of the day, the faculty at the college have the outline of what the program should be. The difference is the employers are sitting in the middle, and the faculty and staff are sitting on the outside, and they're observing this. And the faculty aren't saying, well, but I really, we gotta include that. That's really important, we gotta have that there. It's about the employer saying what's important. What happens after that is the faculty take that spreadsheet and they look at all the things that were important and they match it up with their existing curriculum and they crosswalk it and say, well, I guess we don't need to teach this anymore, or we need to really improve in this, or we teach this in 3 different courses, maybe we can combine this in a different way. So we're not adding another 12 credits to an already overloaded associate degree. So it's a very different process, and it's co-led by one business person and one person from the college. And they are actually putting the agenda together and leading this side by side. It's a very effective way to do curriculum development and to validate it and have the employers feel like, okay, so I really am engaged in this process. But it's based on a lot of follow-through as well. So educators really want to have employers who know what those skills are. If employers can't come and articulate 3 to 5 years, this is what we need, they want employers who value the institution. If they don't know your institution, they can't value it. So that engagement is critical. And employers who want to help. And employers want instructors who show interest, who listen, who respond to suggestions, and respect that time commitment. So employer engagement typically includes some of the things that you see here. So the review and revision of curriculum, career development, work-based learning, could be internships, could be apprenticeships, could be tours, could be job shadow, any number of things. Staff development, some marketing. The best employers are those that will say, go to this college and get this training, then come back and see me. If you don't have employers in your area that are saying that, they need to know more about what it is you're offering to them so that they know what the outcome would be. So there are some challenges. Moving from that discussion to the commitment, finding the right people to make things happen, both at the company and the college level. Who has the authority to make these decisions and work together? What's that common ground? Understanding that terminology and technology, engaging the right combination of employers, and keeping all the partners engaged to maintain the momentum. Finding the right combination of employers can be a challenge. We did one of the built sessions, and we had UPS, and then we had a multimedia marketing company that had 2 employees. So you're going to do a broad range. Not everything was applicable for both of them, and some of those things were outliers that nobody in the room, they said, well, UPS, that's important to you, but nobody else. That becomes more of a customized training for UPS then, as opposed to something that's included in a degree. So the bottom line, though, is that you are looking to match those economic development needs of the community and create graduates that possess those skills and get into the workforce. So remember, it's about the student. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a program that we built while I was at Gateway. We had our local WIBs and about 30 employers engaged. It was around manufacturing, CNC machine operators. We had a high number of dislocated and underemployed individuals. And we had a CNC program that was not graduating people quick enough. The employers said, find a way to teach people the importance of being on time and showing up every day for work. In fact, they said, just give us a warm body, and we'll take it from there, which is like the biggest insult to a college, right? But they were right. They were like, just send us people. We just need people. So this is what we did. We had faculty meet with those 30 employers individually to identify the skill sets for the entry-level position. Everybody called it something different, right? Every employer had a different name for that position, but we charted their skills, and most of the skills were exactly the same. We designed an intensive 15-week program with wraparound services. They met every day, strict attendance policies. So I'm from Wisconsin, so we use Lombardi time, which means if you aren't there 15 minutes early, you're late, right? So we were funding this through a lot of different grants, and then eventually the S.C. Johnson Foundation funded us. People didn't have to pay anything, so we said we were going to put this attendance policy into place. You miss or you're late 3 times and you're fired from the program. And I will guarantee you there was 1 student fired from every one of those programs because everybody's going to test the limits. Do you really mean you're going to do this, or don't you mean it? And employers valued the fact that we did that because we said, we can tell them to show up just as well as you can, but we have to model it with a consequence. So case management was available, tutoring sessions if they got a grade lower than a B. So we did over 30 of those boot camps, and we trained 600 workers. And out of those 600, 93% of them completed the program, and 90% of them were placed in employment. 18 months later, so we kept doing a rolling 18-month follow-up, and at 18 months, 82% of them were still employed. So we adapted that program then and offered it to rising high school seniors. So they would start the summer between junior and senior year in high school. They did this boot camp program in the afternoons of their fall semester. For their spring semester, they did an internship. So by the time they graduated high school, they had 15 college credits, they had a certificate, they had done a paid internship, and they had a job offer and a high school diploma. The employers attended the graduation. They do the interviews right after they graduate and hire them on the spot, and many of them, we do graduation on a Friday, and many of them were starting the next Monday. It's a very successful program. Not easy to put together. We learned a lot along the way. So the whole idea of engaging employers, at Cord, we've developed a toolkit which is available to you to use, which really helps, regardless of your organization, take a look at who is our audience, who are we working with, what employers are we working with, who hires our students, who doesn't hire them. Who doesn't hire them is the bigger question. Why aren't they hiring them? Do they not know about you? Do they not know about the program? Did they have a bad experience? Do you not want to talk to them about that experience? They're hard conversations to have, but they're the ones that you need to get with. Developing your program, which is that business and industry leadership approach. Mining for deeper engagement. So you have an employer engaged in one part of your organization. How do you now expand that and help them see that there's other opportunities for engagement? Generating support. That does not always mean money. It means in-kind type things. It could be employers providing lab assistance for you or coming in and do mock interviews. And then joining voices. How do you get employers to really be advocates for your programs? So now that you have the employers there, how do you actually put these programs together? These are, we've talked through this, unemployed, underemployed, a range of support services, the engagement. So let's take a look at 7 components of learner needs. If any of you have seen Maslow's hierarchy, you'll see that this kind of starts with the personal needs. When we looked back at who should be involved in your career pathway, who would be best positioned in your community to provide for personal needs? Things like homelessness, childcare, transportation. Probably not the college, probably not your economic development organization, probably your human services people. Academic skills, who handles GED, ELL, those types of basic skills. The career focus from an advising standpoint or an employer's opening their doors for tours so that people can see what do the jobs look like there. Employability skills, how do we teach them to show up every day on time? How to listen, how to think critically. And then the career and technical skills, as you can see, are pretty far up that ladder. Doesn't mean they have to happen stacked like they are. They can happen simultaneously. So that ladder has to be flexible, and there's the 3 different levels: foundation, the technical core, and the technical specialty. Here's the essential ingredients. So honest review of the education offerings and the placement data. Bringing people together not just once a year, including some things like resume writing workshops and so on. Don't water down the curriculum. Number 4, rigorous, sequential, contextualized. When we put our boot camp together, those students were expected to do the same level of work as anybody that had taken our associate degree program before. So we didn't water it down, and it's amazing when you hold people's feet to the fire that they rise to the occasion and they met the expectations. Multiple entry, work-based learning, the continuum of options for them, alternative scheduling. You know, we did 40 hours a week, and nobody at our college had ever done anything like that before. Like, how are you going to possibly do that? Well, we did it. It wasn't as difficult as somebody would have thought. So we're going to talk a little bit about credentials. This is the mess of credentials that you see here. They come from state systems. They come from professional associations, academic programs. The important part is that they're industry recognized. That means that they're sought or valued by employers. Now, employers, a lot of times, when we talked about alphabet soup before, if we throw out a bunch of acronyms, now my background, I worked a lot with manufacturers, so I throw out AWS or NIMS or MSSC, and they'd go, I'm like, do you value that? Do you want to hire people with that? They're like, what does that mean? What's behind it? So we need to take the time to explain to them, here's the skills that it represents, not just the alphabet soup that comes with it. Some employers will know what they are, but not everybody will, and it doesn't hurt to explain it to them. The other piece that's good to share with employers is this graph. This comes out of ACTE. What's the difference between a certificate, a certification, a degree, and a license? Who awards it? How do you get it? What does it mean? Where is it completed? Who maintains it? And some examples. It's a great thing to share with employers. I'm speeding up a little so that I have time to show you some of the maps that we have here. These can be really difficult to see, even probably if you're sitting up front. And the reason that I put this one up here is to show you they can be as difficult or as easy as you want them to be. This actual pathway map shows that somebody comes in, that bracket on the left side is the employer input. There's different levels that somebody goes through. This one has 5 different levels. It's very colorful. It's not the easiest thing to follow, however. Here's one that's simple. And there's other ones, not just Gateway because I worked there, but this was the diesel equipment technology. So we start with previous credit. What have you done in the past? What can we give you credit for? There's a certificate program. In this one, it's a diesel mechanic. We say what the jobs are, what they earn, and we embedded credentials and certifications into every level. So there are over 12 credentials embedded in the associate degree. But they're only there because employers said, yes, we'll hire somebody once they have that. So this individual for the certificate has a multimeter and heavy-duty equipment, safety credential. Then they have brake systems and refrigerant and so on. So it goes on and on. But without employers saying that's of value to us, we would have never put those certifications in there. Harper College, which is in the Chicago area, put this together for mechatronics and automation. So they started with a certificate, which is that orange line on the left. And off of that, they built 4 different certifications: automation, machining, fabrication, and logistics. Every one of those validated by industry to say, yes, we would hire somebody that had this skill set. This is a great visual to give a student who's thinking about a career and not really sure which one to go with. And if you say employers have designed this and they will hire you if you do this, there's nothing better than telling a student that here's the roadmap for you. So how do they happen at the program level? Obviously, you need to know who's your target audience. And because we meet people where they are, that's what 2-year colleges do, right? We take people from where they are to whatever the next level is. How are you going to get them there? What kind of methods will they benefit from? What are the support systems? And then how will you measure their success? You might do bridge programs, getting them ready. We did integrated education and training, so their math and English were integrated into the boot camp that they were taking for manufacturing. We had stackable certificates and credentials for them. They all did internships, and our program led not only to an associate's degree, but also to an apprenticeship program if that's the path that they chose to take. And in Wisconsin, we had apprenticeships in place before the feds did apprenticeship. We were like one of the first states to ever do apprenticeship back 110 years ago. So automotive technology, here's another visual of a map. They start with short-term training on the left, a 1-year certificate, a 2-year certificate, a 2-year degree. And in here, what are the courses they take? What are the credentials they get? What are the certifications? And then, what are the requirements at each of those stages? This one does show at the top what is the title of the position you would have and what are the earning potentials for you. Minnesota Fast Track. Minnesota did a bridge program, which really was focused on how do we take ABE and ELL students and get them engaged here and lead them to a post-secondary credential. And Plugged In Virginia. Plugged In Virginia did a very interesting program. You'll see that across the top, it's 6 months long, but all these different levels. They did GED, they did professional soft skills, digital literacy. They contextualized their content. So How many of you are familiar with what that means, contextualized instruction? That's when you embed math or English into your technical area. So it would be technical report writing could be your English class, right? Or you could have math for the trades. So it's going to be something that takes whatever that academic content area and embeds it into whatever CTE program that you're in, so that you're learning the why. Why do I need to know this? Why do I need to know math if I'm going to be a machinist? Why do I need to know math? I'm going to be a nurse. Well, we hope that both of those occupations are going to know math, right? Especially the nurse, probably, right? Even more so. And then they put in 21st century skills and integrated that application. So within a 6-month program, they took individuals through this fast-paced program. Pennsylvania did one in a medical careers pathway, pretty similar to the one that I shared with you before. Elgin, Illinois did a healthcare bridge program. And here they did the behind-the-scene tours, and they really moved people through this quickly so that they could see themselves. These were GED and ELL students. They wanted to get them in, just like Marble Falls, Texas was looking at how do we engage everybody within our local population so that they all can find a place working within a good paying job. So the contextualized instruction, those are the connections between the foundation and the technical discipline. Those basic and occupational, why do I have to learn this? And then the real world applications. So once you have that all together, how do you manage these moving parts, right? So we've got employers at the table, we've got curriculum development going on, we have faculty that are validating curriculum. So here are some of the challenges, right? And we knew there'd be challenges. So the first one is a critical mass of support from employers. And we know that employers are busy running their business. And I think the most important thing that we can do when we all come together is to be respectful of timeliness, follow through, how we communicate with each other. We're building a relationship with them, and that relationship can either go very well because you follow through and you do what you say you're going to do, or it can fall apart because, once again, we counted on somebody to do something and it didn't happen. Finding the right people in the companies that have the passion to make something happen and the authority to make it happen. So I said before, you may have different people involved from a company because they're at different levels and you need different things from them. You might need boots on the ground, tell me what this individual needs to know and do, or you might have the futurist person who's saying this is where this company is going in the next 5 years. Articulating expectations, the common ground, the needs, and that terminology again. Engaging the right combination of employees who can articulate the skills. So sometimes you want the people who are, who are actually doing the work to come in and talk about what is this job like. Jamie mentioned before job descriptions. We know oftentimes employers don't have time to update those job descriptions. And so they're working off of something that is not current or accurate. The employee can say, well, I don't do that. I do a lot more of this now. That can be helpful when you're designing something because you're designing for reality, not the position description that might be a little bit outdated. And then how do you evaluate it? A lot of people use logic models for this. I don't know how familiar any of you are with a logic model where you put together what are the inputs, what are the activities, what are the outputs, and then what are the outcomes. Now those outcomes and outputs, you're going to want that from every one of the partners around the table. You're going to want to know what are the outcomes that you're being measured by, and you're being measured by, and you're being measured by, because we all live in a world where our funding is going to be tied to what have you done lately, what are the outcomes, and do you continue doing more of that? And be as specific as possible when you develop that model. So some considerations, the common vision at a state level and a local level, the key messages, and key messengers. So people that talk about career pathways, that use that type of terminology, when you're talking with your K-12 partners, understand what it means to have a pathway and what their role is in it, what the college's role, and what the employer's role, and all the wraparound services. Everybody should define it the same. Never miss an opportunity to talk about career pathways and the success stories. So if you secured an appointment with somebody who has some money to invest, and you have 5 minutes to explain the adult career pathway program that you're putting together in your local area, either it already exists or you're thinking about it, what would you say? What would you tell them? Where are you at? Who have you brought to the table? What's the goal that you're moving towards? Would your message be clear or clear as mud? Right? So this is an excellent resource, and you'll see the link at the bottom of it there. It's an exchange of all of the organizations that you see on this page of best practices. And so you can take, if you remember the Department of Labor 6-step model that was up there, the newsletters are broken down by those 6 different steps. So you can say, I'm only interested in policy and procedure. I'm only interested in cross-functional partners at the table. I'm only interested in how I get employers to the table. And you can get a news feed from them with best practices of how things are working across the country and things that you might want to emulate. So, questions from anybody? I know it's a lot. I hope you also saw that there's no one right way to do a pathway, right? Either graphically, some are very busy, some are very simplistic, but there's also no wrong way to do it. So the most important thing is to start somewhere. And I know from Jamie's presentation, he said that everybody was starting kind of with a one sector strategy, which is an excellent idea. Get one area figured out, do it well, and then replicate that as you can. And a lot of the partners at the table might be the same partners other than the employers that are there.
I have a question.
Yes?
If you have multiple, you mentioned you got to get all the partners at the table and everybody's got to stay in their lane. How do you think the best way to bridge that is? Where, like, if you have duplicating economic development organizations in a community, or you have so many different service delivery that might be targeting the same kind of population, but
So you've got redundancy happening.
and just trying to really get it more specialized and where it's on a mapping system.
Right. I think a good starting point is to ask each of those partners to come to the table with what's their core mission, what they do, and who they serve. And you may have overlap. It sounds like if you've got multiple economic development organizations within one community, yeah, their purpose is probably the same, but do they focus on different types of industry sectors, or are they just overlapping economic development organizations? Because we had a different one for every community. We never had 2 economic development organizations for one community. You have that, though?
There's some of that in our state, yeah.
Were the state economic and then local?
In communities.
Okay.
It's like they'll have maybe a chamber of commerce, you might have a development corporation,
We have chambers of commerce that, yes, but our chambers of commerce focused more on service industry, and our economic development partners were dealing more with manufacturing and logistics and those types. So they had already kind of sorted out, because they didn't want to be stepping on toes and didn't want to be presenting a not unified front of our community, because they're both going out and recruiting companies to come to the area, and they're both calling on the same types of entities. That seems like that would be a confusing message for whoever they're trying to recruit into the community. I think it would depend on what's the programmatic area. Does the Chamber of Commerce, if you're putting a healthcare program together, who normally would work with hospitals? Would it be your economic development, or would it be the chamber? Or do they both? But those are bigger conversations to have more at that really top level, because you want to make sure that they might both have a role to play, just not the same role. Yeah. Other questions from anybody? All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate having you here.